This is not some guy who, worked in the government 30 years ago who's coming forward with a YouTube video. This is a guy who was deeply involved in the intelligence community of the U.S. government up until April of this year.
What would be the rationale for keeping it quiet of government, let alone through 10 or 12 different administrations, that this secret has been kept quiet? Why would they keep it quiet?
Hey, if you're searching around for this David Grusch UFO whistleblower story, I hope you'll stick around for this video and my analysis. I'm going to be looking at how the story's been treated since it just broke 2 days ago. So we've had basically 48 hours of a response. So I'm going to be looking at the pattern that I see. Also, there's so many videos out there. Actually, there's not that many, but there's so many videos out there that are going to be looking at this story. And I hope if you come across this video, you'll be more informed about this so that the slants and the statements of talking heads in the media don't form what we think about this and what might actually be the truth of this. Instead, let's look at it critically. Let's look at the facts. Let's think of everything logically with sound reasoning and see what kind of conclusions or plausible scenarios there may be. A little bit about my background before we jump into it here. I'm a history teacher. I'm a professional educator. I also teach critical inquiry and information literacy at the college level. So yeah, real quick, 2 days ago, David Grusch, this guy right here, he came forward both through giving testimony to an article that appeared in The Debrief, and also by giving this interview with News Nation. But more importantly than both of that, which is just how it came to the media, he literally has been going through a legal process through a whistleblower program that was part of the new defense authorization bill for 2023, something new, never done before, that basically protects whistleblowers to come forward. He submitted all of his documented evidence to be reviewed by the Inspector General at the Department of Defense. Inspector General reviewed all of his evidence and said, quote, "It is credible and urgent." So basically approved him to go out and make his statements public. That's the kind of bare bones context you need about how legitimate this is. This isn't some person that used to be in the military decades ago who's, making a YouTube video, something like that. This is for real. There's going to be a hearing about this. There's going to be an investigation. There is an investigation already underway to evaluate the veracity of his claims, his evidence. He is saying that for decades, the United States has been recovering UFOs, which are now called UAPs, crafts of unknown origin that are not, Earth-made, not human-made, and also even bodies. He's even gone on record saying, and that this has been kept secret and it has been withheld from congressional oversight. And also has said that there has been a disinformation campaign targeting the American populace, and I quote him, "that's immoral and unethical." So these are his reasons for coming forward and basically what he's saying. Now, we've only gotten about maybe 15 minutes at best, or they're really just clips, maybe not even 15 minutes of his interview. They did a longer interview, and this Sunday, they are going to be airing, I believe, the full interview, if not at least more, a lot more from him in an interview on News Nation this Sunday. And you can watch the episode free online. So after I saw this News Nation story, I have basically just been constantly checking to see how the media is going to pick this up and spin it. And one thing I'm noticing right away is that the big media companies are not touching this at all. I find that to be pretty interesting and pretty significant. You can see here, this is the day after he came out with his claims, and there's just not even remotely. This is just like from my home screen on my phone, where any of the biggest kind of most interesting headlines are always there. And anytime there's like a huge story, it's like in all the headlines. So government official comes out and officially charges on record, full evidence, everything, testimony, everything, coming out fully is who he says he is, fully high credential. He's been vouched for by multiple other highly credible individuals. Comes out, says that the United States government has had a UFO crash retrieval program for decades, has kept it secret, has recovered parts and full crafts and even beings, and it's nowhere on the news. Wow. To me, it's just like, okay. Man, how asleep are we? And we're just being kept asleep. So anyway, I collected different video clips. Through this, we can kind of get an idea of how the media is beginning to spin this. But keep in mind, these are mostly all independent media sources, except for Fox News. And Fox News, of course, is one of those stations that they can almost get away with this because they've made themselves like everybody takes it with a grain of salt. Or it's just a certain audience where they've covered this topic openly. So I expected Fox News to actually pick this up. So we'll start with the short interviews from the Congress members, and this is like all we've got so far.
I think we should be open to hearing it and telling the American people as much as we possibly can.
I think people are ready to hear whatever's out there. Maybe it's man-made aircraft, maybe it's otherworldly. Stay tuned.
Congress rolled back some protections, or actually increased protections for whistleblowers in this area. So things that have previously been behind the firewall, caught up in the bureaucracy, that's why we're now seeing whistleblowers feel free to come forward, like with coming to Congress last year. So I think we're just learning about all that's been looked into over these decades. And I think more information is better, but I'm hoping our visitors are friendly.
This conversation was kind of painful to watch. And she actually is the only one that I feel like has had a intelligent and insightful thing to say and put forth important information that we need to understand this story. And that's that the Defense Authorization Act of 2023 came out with new provisions to create a safe pathway for whistleblowers to come forward. We can't ignore that as an important fact in this whole story, because we're hearing all types of people saying, oh, why would he come forward now? Why would this come out now? How could he not have, been silenced, and how could he have not been harassed? Meanwhile, he's filing official complaints with evidence of the retaliation that, as it's put. So, but she actually highlights a very important point and even says, now this is going to be officially looked into. Decades of evidence. It's going to be a whole investigation. But then she sort of turns the topic a bit.
Yes, they better be friendly. They're obviously smart, so we better hope they're friendly as well.
Or else we're going to be the top 3 targets.
Yeah, and I mean, it couldn't look. It could be like we could be dumber than we are at the moment in our societies. Could it be?
But the question remains:
maybe they're not brilliant. Maybe they're not.
But and focusing on this story now, this whistleblower breaking story here. Were this to be true, we are in a race with definitely enemy nations like China, for example, to uncover the root of this that could be used for their military benefit. That should be a frightening thought to any American, regardless whether you believe in little green men. What say you, Kaylee?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they're unidentified aircrafts is troublesome. I mean, whatever it is, extraterrestrial or China or Russia, like, who is putting these unidentified objects above us in U.S. airspace and beyond? And, this whistleblower, he says that these crafts are of non-human origins, and I asked myself, how does he know that? How could it could be just China that has some more advanced technology than us, but he went on to say he came to that conclusion based.
Would he really go through all this trouble and put himself in this kind of a position if he didn't think that he had good reasons to submit documents and evidence to the Department of Defense?
Based on the vehicle morphologies and material science testing and the possession of unique atomic arrangements. So maybe someone can translate that for me. Maybe you know, Emily, but how do you know they're non-human?
Guys, everyone's homework is to listen to all of Bob Lazar's interviews. You will become a believer like me. And when they do land, I will say, I told you so.
She just avoided a question to maybe actually keep talking about it more constructively. And so they just sort of laugh it off, and it's kind of cringy, says Bob Lazar. It's Bob Lazar. So if you've done any kind of research into all this stuff, everybody knows it's Bob Lazar. But yeah, she kind of just avoids the question, and I just feel like not much was said here. There's no discussion about the implications or the facts and the context of the case and the story. It's more just like this speculation about nothing, really.
Tell the basic truth. Let us know. Do you think the government would ever just say, oh, you know what, we've been lying to you for 70 years. We got aliens, we got dead aliens. Here they are. I mean, the country would never trust the government again. And plus, we'd all take the cash out of the banks and start buying weapons, right?
That is a bit of a flag for me of maybe what Fox News' angle is on this. Panic, fear, militarize, in the threat. Because how is that thinking logical? Oh, well, if they for decades have known about aliens, and that means I'm going to the store and getting a bunch of guns. Like, what?
2023 National Defense Authorization Act by President Biden. Previously undisclosed reports and programs are slowly becoming accessible for public consumption. This significant step towards transparency in matters of UFOs and extraterrestrial intelligence is groundbreaking, but it raises an unsettling question or questions. Are we ready for the truth? And why now?
Those are some important questions. Are we ready for the truth, I think, is an important question. I feel like it depends, of course, and that's a subject for a whole nother video. But the second question, why now? Again, I think there's a very obvious, simple answer. Because legislation was just passed months ago to allow a safe pathway for whistleblowers to come forward with information, with claims like this.
UFOs are actually real, and apparently so is extraterrestrial life. Now we know. In a normal country, this news would qualify as a bombshell, the story of the millennium. But in our country, it doesn't.
I agree. And this, like I was saying before, this story just isn't getting picked up by any of the mainstream media outlets or newspapers, and it's just being ignored. It's just being downright ignored, and I think it's really the biggest story in the world.
Are we alone, Robbie?
I'm going to break your heart and the hearts of many of our viewers and say that, yes, we are. Look, I'm not persuaded by this stuff.
Why
It's
not?
It's a lot of dramatic claims that just don't add up. Unidentified.
But they do add up. And if you really were to study the subject and look at all of the government documents, military documents, declassified documents, and if you look at all of the reports, all of the facts, all of the testimonies, both from civilians and from military, government, and professional personnel over decades and decades, starting from the 1940s, starting at the very least from the 1947 Roswell crash. That alone, that case, there's overwhelming evidence. If you really knew all of the information that's available to try to tackle such a question of, is this possible? You wouldn't say something like that.
Identified flying objects doesn't necessarily mean aliens. It can be technology from other countries, it can even be from other agencies within our own government, things that don't make sense to the pilots who saw them. Non-human aliens,
Is
it's not.
So hard
Why do they always
for you
crash
to
in the American
believe?
Southwest near a military base?
America
Nobody
is number
sees it.
one, Robbie.
They never crash in Midtown Manhattan.
Maybe there's something going on out west in Nevada or Roswell, whatever is happening out there that has caused aliens to seek out that technology and to make contact at that point. That's the argument.
The argument is an interesting argument that I do not buy at all.
I think that sort of just shows how a lot of people are going to think about this. On the one side, you have the guy, he's just total hard skeptic, like, where's the proof? Well, the proof is in the hands of the Inspector General of Intelligence of the United States military, United States Pentagon. That's where the evidence is right now. That has been able to come out through this new process. He says, I'm not buying that at all, that something would have crashed in the New Mexico desert. And read all the evidence, read into the Roswell case. There's just so much that really just about proves that something of unknown, truly unknown origin with an advanced technology actually did crash and was investigated and recovered by the United States military. Honestly, if you're skeptical about this, go watch a 1978 documentary called UFOs Are Real which was made in part by a researcher named Stanton Friedman, and also read his books. He was a scientist. He was one of the original scientists that went on the first panel back in the day when the government was actually taking this seriously, because there were so many credible reports from so many different pilots and military personnel, civilians. And he actually was a nuclear physicist. He decided to devote his whole career to studying this. Stanton Friedman spent decades, wrote a bunch of books, made a documentary or two. This one, the evidence they present in UFOs Are Real, 1978, go watch it. The evidence they present, it's like, how has this been kept secret? And you're talking 1947. You're talking completely authentic government memos from people at the top of departments that were in charge of investigating such things as aerial phenomenon, literally saying, calling them flying discs and describing their motions and saying that they are real and they're physical. So 1947, let's look at all the facts of this and just not be stupid and not try to find ways to disbelieve this person. In fact, it's plausible. It's very plausible. So let's just see how it unfolds. But more importantly, let's advocate for the government really being transparent, continuing to be transparent going forward with this.
I do not buy at all.
Before waiting for the government to release the data, I'm very much prepared to find the data myself, just like a kid, because the sky is not classified.
The sky is not classified, not yet anyway. And I wish you good luck with it, because I think that there would be something really liberating about knowing that we're not alone.
That was Avi Loeb. He is a figure in this whole development of this whole larger topic. He's a Harvard astronomer, and he made an observation, I believe it was in 2017, where he observed something coming into our solar system that was anomalous and truly anomalous, meaning he thought there was actually a very good chance that it was an artificial or an intelligent craft. He's been continuing to study this, and he's continuing to study these things through his Galileo project. So he's somebody that the media is going to for comments. He's spoken at large about the idea of aliens on a number of different places. I mean, I know he did a whole interview on Lex Friedman and a bunch of podcasts. He's basically saying that he's going to be looking for it. The funny thing is that's about the only angle I've agreed with this guy Chris Cuomo on, the reporter, when he says that it would be liberating. And I actually agree with him, because imagine we could be at a place where it's confirmed, yes, there are these super intelligent beings with this very advanced technology, and they're peaceful. Imagine what that would open up to us. We know that there's more to this. It's liberating, right? We're not alone in the darkness, not knowing what anything is, what happens when we die, suffering. We have 3 billion out of 8 billion people on this planet that are starving. They don't have enough food to live. So, and that was reported by The Economist, apparently, in an article in the last year or a few years. I haven't read the article myself, but I've heard it referred to several times. And I'm sure that fact wouldn't really surprise us, 3 billion out of 8 billion. So what if there's a technology, a free energy? What if there is this renewable, highly powerful, clean energy? It's a game changer. So think of the positivity that could come from this. And like the reporter says here, it could be liberating. And I really think that that's what we should focus on, not what's the threat. I think it's a fallacy to think that we have any good reason to try to prepare for a threat. Because with this type of technology, there's nothing we can do. And if they had bad intentions, they would have made that clear 70 years ago or at some point in this time period. And in fact, evidence that we do have, such as military personnel at nuclear bases in various locations throughout various times over the last 75 years, have reported these UFOs coming and disarming the missiles, or they're just observations. Nothing hostile is ever done.
Here's the part I don't get. Why wouldn't we know? Like, what would be What would be the rationale for keeping it quiet of government, let alone through 10 or 12 different administrations, that this secret has been kept quiet? Why would they keep it quiet?
Well, because when it first started, it was the Cold War, and it was the late 1940s, post World War II, and it was a totally different kind of environment. And if they did recover, which a lot of evidence really does show, and we're almost getting to the point that the truth is coming out, they really did recover such craft in 1947, Roswell, maybe even before it. They would have kept it secret because they did not want the Soviets to find out about it. And in fact, there were KGB spies that had infiltrated parts of the military and intelligence community of the United States. So to keep something like this secret, you had to keep it really, really compartmentalized so it wouldn't leak out to any sources. I'm saying this from the words and the reports of Lieutenant Philip Corso, who wrote a book in the 90s called The Day After Roswell. I highly, highly recommend go reading that now, because if these claims prove to be true, it vindicates everything he claims in the book, which he basically says he had access at his position, which he really did have. He was the head of the Foreign Technology Desk in the Pentagon in the late 1950s or in the 1960s, a decade or so after Roswell, and he was given the Roswell file to look at it, to go through these strange pieces of debris that had been collected by the Army and put in their own stash. And according to Corso, each department of the military became almost a little competition within the military of like who could get what and keep it secret from each other. In the book, he explains from his experience that when we think of the government or we think of the army or the military, it's not this one cohesive moving unit. It's these various factions competing with each other. And of course, we have no idea. Both of these guys here have no idea what it looks like on the inside. David Grusch, on the other hand, 14 years of experience in the intelligence community, plus one of the highly credible individuals, Chris Mellon, who's backing him up, 20 years in the intelligence community, former assistant secretary general of the Department of Defense. So there's lots of reasons, and that's not even the tip of the iceberg, really, but that's just the basic one to start off, why this would have been kept secret from the start, why it would have been able to be kept very compartmentalized and only on a need-to-know basis, and that would have just very likely that just would have continued through the decades.
Yeah, that's the thing. It would have to be this massive worldwide conspiracy.
It wouldn't, though, because it's not a massive worldwide conspiracy.
Basically, they're claiming that we've had alien craft for many, many decades, and that we've been gradually releasing the technology throughout the world, but only the US has it, and they've somehow managed to get everybody else to go along with this, and that somehow we've managed to keep this going for around 70 years or so, but we don't really have any evidence of this.
I don't know where this guy is getting any of this information from. It's not on anything that I've been able to find available through articles, through any statements that have been made available of what Grusch said, but I haven't seen anywhere that he's claimed the U.S. has slowly given this to the rest of the world and gotten them all to go along with it. Like, where are these claims coming from? Grusch never said these. So I don't know where he's coming from that from. And then plus, again, the fact, this idea that we don't have any evidence. We're discounting all of the civilian evidence, if you will, because the UFO phenomenon has been ignored by the official government authorities for this whole period of time. We still have a lot of very high quality civilian data, including, individuals who went out on a limb to do this, like J. Allen Hynek, who was the first scientific advisor to the Project Blue Book. And he served there for 20 years studying UFOs. After that, he was convinced there was something real to it, and he continued to have organizations where he directed investigations and published books and whatnot. And guys like Stanton Friedman, who was another scientist that I think I mentioned before, and he also wrote books. It's all based on evidence. Go read all of those and then say that there's no evidence that this has been going on. It's just that this evidence has never been taken seriously, has never been put in any kind of court of law or submitted to Congress in any kind of way to be investigated until potentially and apparently now.
Now, everything that Grusch said to the media was actually cleared by the Department of Defense. That means that he didn't actually reveal any secrets. It doesn't mean that they agreed with what he said.
I didn't get that part either. And the Pentagon.
That's another arguing point. A lot of from the skeptical viewpoint that's being put forth, they cleared it, so therefore there was nothing secret in it that they didn't want to be cleared. However, that's actually not true. There were certain things that he was told that he could not talk about, and so he is not disclosing everything. He's disclosing what he was cleared to be able to. Plus, it's kind of a logical fallacy, because if the idea was to bring these secrets out, or these kind of covert black ops programs, rogue elements sort of operating within the military-industrial complex, as Eisenhower coined the term back in the 50s, then the Department of Defense Inspector General, doing his due diligence as a government official, he should be investigating. He should be allowing this witness to say what his claims are and what his evidence is arguing for. Even if there were potential secrets that had been held, the idea is for it to come out.
So, first of all, Mick's point is that Grusch isn't saying anything that the United States government hasn't talked about already, except...
He's making a generalization, saying the United States government hasn't talked about. I mean, what does that even mean? We have scores and scores of government witnesses who have gone on record in one way or another that they have knowledge or experience that would corroborate these claims.
Except that he's talking about the program and the existence of the program and what they're looking for. The United States government has never said they found an alien spacecraft. But people at the Pentagon have pushed back on this. I wanted to get the language right. But the Pentagon has said this. Has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials may have existed in the past or exist currently. What does that mean in non-government acronym speak? It means this theory that they found alien stuff and been using the technology and releasing it through the world is bunk.
No, sorry. That is an invalid statement, and you're misleading the audience there. It's not a theory. It's not some random conspiracy theory. It is literally a high-level intelligence officer going through a formalized process and making claims and submitting evidence for it. The Department of Defense saying that has not discovered this particular group, RO, one particular committee group that's tasked with something, has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrials may exist. Materials have existed in the past or exist currently. So it's careful language. It doesn't deny that. It doesn't say that there's any evidence that he's lying or that there's no grounds to his claims. They're just sort of remaining kind of neutral in a sense on this. They're certainly not saying that it's bunk.
So what do you think comes with Grusch? Do you think he has any receipts?
Well, I think we've got to realize that reverse engineering programs of crashed spacecraft is actually a real thing. This is something that actually happens. Sometimes Russian spacecraft crash. Sometimes Chinese spacecraft crash. And we retrieve the remains and then we study them, and it's top secret. And I think it's possible that some people in those programs, which are very highly compartmentalized, not everyone knows what everybody else is working on, became convinced that they were working on alien technology. And somehow this kind of story grew within the group. And now you've got a bunch of people who think that they were working on alien technology when they were really just working on Chinese technology. So we've really got to see what he actually tells Congress and what other people he brings along to give testimony to Congress. Because right now, all we have is he's heard other people tell him things. And that's really not good enough as evidence.
I think that that's fair. We are going off what he says, but we don't know what the evidence is. He has submitted that evidence to be investigated. He has given the names to be investigated and whatever information that's classified that we don't know about. But I think it's a little bit far-fetched to think that, I mean, it's not impossible, but to think that there would be all of these senior intelligence officers who are supposed to be keeping our country safe and being the best and the brightest in these positions, for them to think that they were working on something non-human, bodies and crafts that were non-human, and it could just be something that Russia or China had. I would need some better arguing points and evidence to think that there's a plausibility to that. But of course, it's not impossible that that would be the case. Given all of the evidence to the other scenario, that there is really something real to this, and there's something real to UFOs, and this has been known and virtually proven since the 1940s, weighing that against this theory that this group of intelligence officers, senior level intelligence officers, got so convinced that they were working on alien craft that they started talking about it and now they're testifying. Which one seems more plausible given the data we have right now? You have to decide that for yourself.
I think Grusch is the real deal, and I look forward to people putting as much attention on checking him out as they can, because I think he checks out.
Wasn't fired, doesn't have beef that we know about. The government hasn't come forward and said he was fired or has beef. And in fact, he is telling us the truth as far as we know about going to DOD for pre-publication clearance. And he was told not to talk about certain things. Is that your understanding as well?
Well, that's what it's called the DOPSA document, and it basically allows him to talk about certain things. Now, it's a dangerous game for a person like Dave Grusch, because that puts a line there, and he has to, as he's answering questions for Ross or yourself in the future, he has to wonder whether he's going over that line or not. So he's got, he's obviously...
Contrary to what some of the skeptical guests were saying, that there's nothing secret or they're just letting him say things, he was told things that he couldn't say, information that he couldn't share.
Obviously being watched by the government to make sure that he stays on the right side of what they're allowing him to talk about. But I think it is pretty wild that the government has said, go ahead, Dave, tell your story. And that's exactly what he's doing. And it's interesting. I'm not sure people even understand this. In addition to all the credentials this guy has, he actually worked on the presidential daily briefing. He was one of the guys trusted to literally walk that briefing over to the White House. This is not some guy who, worked in the government 30 years ago who's coming forward with a YouTube video. This is a guy who was deeply involved in the intelligence community of the U.S. government up until April of this year. And he's telling a story that, as you've pointed out, is pretty radical. And yet there's a lot of reason to believe that it's true.
Well, it's nice to end it on more of a positive, more of a open-minded note. Giving the guy the benefit of the doubt, given a chance that he's not just some liar or someone who's misinformed. And I mean, the guy held a very high position that I hope we would expect someone like this to be very qualified and very reputable and trusted to be in that type of a position up to just a couple months ago, to then retire and then come forward with this. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's look at the facts as they unravel instead of speculating as to why this is not true and focusing our energy on that. Instead, we should be focusing on making sure the government stays transparent with this and even doing whatever we could do in the meantime to help, maybe writing our representatives about how to move forward with this, how we'd like them to handle this, and what we'd like them to consider. But of course, we don't live in times like that anymore. People just, either just don't have the time to care or they're just distracted by something else. But anyway, I hope you got some value from this. It's a lot. I just want to keep looking at this with a critical, discerning eye and making sure that we're really thinking about everything with sound reasoning and considering all the evidence that the few media outlets that are covering this are lacking and are not considering in these arguing points that are being discussed. So we'll see how this unfolds. I have high hopes for it. And of course, check out the full interview coming Sunday night. And then right after that on Monday is going to be the disclosure event in Washington, D.C., Stephen Greer, is going to have another panel of former military insiders coming out. Plus, has a bunch of documents that are being shared. He's also submitted his entire drive full of documents proving that this has been happening, that there's been these rogue entities within the military-industrial complex that's been keeping this under wraps, and that's been suppressing it. We're going to see where it all goes. We're in the thick of it right now, and people are so asleep that they don't even realize it. It's funny because two friends of mine that are very trusted friends and are open-minded people who like to keep up on things, they both said the same thing when I called them today to talk about this. I said, "Hey, did you see the UFO story? Can you believe it?" "Oh, I saw like something somewhere on my feed, but I skipped it. I didn't bother looking into it." That's the reaction that so many people, I'm sure, are going to have. It's just another UFO. We've all heard that before. Military whistleblower, ex-government whistleblower says, government had aliens, UFOs. It's like entertainment. It's been relegated to like fringe but no, this is not that. This is something totally different, and it has the implications to reveal potentially to humanity that there are other types of beings living in our universe that have visited Earth and we have interacted with to some degree. And it's been kept from our knowledge. It's been kept secret. It's nothing short of the most fascinating story really ever, until at least this gets resolved and we see where it goes.